We should be good to go. So Julia, if you wouldn't mind introducing.
Yeah, of course. One second. My roommates are yelling in the background. Having headphones. Yeah, so today we're hearing from Sandy Cohen, who is works at the Nashville Public Library, the director of the library services for the deaf and hard of hearing. Yes, just an overall accessibility director. We wanted to hear from someone who um, works in that kind of context. I think it was important in scheduling our events for this semester to at least highlight one person who specializes in making libraries accessible for people with disabilities. And that's Sandy. I'm so excited to hear about your career, what you do. Let us know if you need anything. We're here.
Will do. Thank you very, very much for having me. My titles are many because they're all pretty much made up. I work in under a false title. I'm an administrative services manager, something according to the city of Nashville. So all of my different titles or jobs that I do have creative titles that I basically have made up to suit the occasion and whatever I'm doing. So I'm the equal access manager if I'm talking to the Nashville Public Library folks. I'm the director of the library services for the deaf and hard of hearing if I'm speaking to a group of people interested in deafness and hearing loss outside of the Nashville area. So it just kind of varies, and that's an okay thing for me. But until it gets to the point where somebody says, "Well, who do you work for?" And I work for the city of Nashville. I'm a Nashville Public Library employee. For one of the programs, though, the library services for the deaf and hard of hearing. In part, it's funded by the state of Tennessee, and so people who live outside of the Nashville area often think that I'm a state employee instead of a city employee. So it does get confusing at times, but I am a full-time Nashville Public Library employee. And I have three basic programs underneath my auspices. And I'm going to kind of take them one by one so you know a little bit about them. One is the Nashville Talking Library, and the Nashville Talking Library is the second one before I get into what it is. The second, I'm going to talk about the library services for the deaf and hard of hearing. And thirdly, I'm going to talk about accessibility of the Nashville Public Library's programming for the public. So each program developed independent of one another. They were not developed at the same time or in consort with each other. And really, they didn't get combined into one division until like 6.5 years ago, when the library director decided instead of having it parsed out throughout the system, it would come under my auspices. So first, I'm going to talk about the Nashville Talking Library. It began in 1975 as an audio information service for people who are blind or people with print disabilities. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the National Library Service for the Blind and for people with print disabilities. That's a program of the Library of Congress for the same population of people. And we do not duplicate their services at all. Our service, they provide books and large print materials and braille materials for people who are blind or people who can't hold or turn the pages of a book. And you have to fill out a special application in order to receive those services. The same is true for our audio information service. You have to fill out a special form and you have to meet those same criteria. So you have to have a vision disability such that you can't read a book, whether it be a print material or in an e-format. You mustn't be able to either hold or turn the pages of a book. Oftentimes people who have had a stroke maybe, or people who have lost limbs, for whatever reason, that they might not be able to hold a book or turn the pages of a book, they would be eligible for the service. Also, people with a certified reading disability are eligible as well. So the same criteria hold true for the National Library Service and their program, and our Nashville Talking Library program, this audio information service. It started as a radio reading service. Our signal is still broadcast over Nashville Public Radio's tower. So we can serve anyone in the area that can listen to WPLN. And WPLN is the Nashville's public radio station. And it might seem kind of interesting a little bit that the PLN stands for Public Library of Nashville, because the radio station started under the Nashville Public Library. So we broadcast our signal off of there, and we also broadcast our signal online. So we stream the information that we have. We also wrote a skill for an Amazon smart speaker, any of their smart speakers. So we have an Alexa skill that we wrote. So anyone with a smart speaker from Amazon can enable the Nashville Talking Library and just listen to it, which is nice. We read the newest of new books that are out on the market. So anyone that wants to access to a bestseller, we read those materials. We read magazines. We read other newspapers. We read the morning newspaper in Nashville from 9 to 11, live on air, Monday through Friday. And we rebroadcast it later in the day as well. We have a monthly program guide that we publish, which is really nice. And that's accessible either people can request it in large print, they can request it in Braille, but we also have it available online as well. We have about 40 to 50 volunteers that read all of our materials. So we have a production studio on one floor that has an audio engineer, and he kind of directs traffic and uploads stuff online and makes it accessible via the radio. And then we've got, and usually 2 volunteers every morning come in and read the newspaper. Then we've got 3 recording booths where volunteers can reserve time and come in and read programming that is specific to what they're assigned to do. So some read books, some read different magazines, and some read other types of print materials that are available. We've got 2 full-time employees right now, and we're looking for a part-time audio engineer person to help the audio engineer. The other person deals with programming and with volunteers, helping the volunteers, train the volunteers, and help them through their day if they have any problems at all. So that's basically the Nashville Talking Library program. It's one of about 85 audio information services around the country. Probably less than a handful of them are affiliated with public libraries. Most of them are affiliated with universities or radio stations throughout the country. So, and there's an International Association of Audio Information Services, who knew, that is international, and we're just one of that group of people. And as well, we share programming between stations. So if we've got outages or something's happening in one area of the country, we're able to download information from other audio information services. So if we're looking for the New York Times, for example, which we air, then that is available from a New York station, for example. So we're able to share any of the programming that we create. So it's a way of making traditional library materials accessible to people who are blind, people with low vision, or people with mobility impairments. The next program I'm going to talk about is the Library Services for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing program. That program began in 1978 as a TTY news service. And they were using big old teletype machines that were repurposed that deaf people finally got access to making telephone calls, utilizing those big teletype machines. And we repurposed them to broadcast international, national, state, local news, weather reports, events that were happening in the deaf and hard of hearing community. So deaf people could call in online and just place their phone on their little coupler that was connected to their teletype machine, and they would sit back and read news and weather that was written down to their language level. And I say down to their language level because most commonly people who are deaf, and especially deaf from birth, pretty much encounter language deprivation, and their English language skills are, even as adults today, averaging between the 3rd and the 5th grade reading level. So the population is definitely suffering from an English language deficit, because English is a spoken language and a written language, whereas American Sign Language, in which they're very fluent in, is a visual gestural language. So it's not that they have no language, although many don't have language until later in life, but they are definitely language delayed in terms of English. So I was recruited. I was in the enviable position of being recruited by the Nashville Public Library System to develop programming after this TTY news service was established. I was working with an interpreting service before coming to the library, and got to know, became fluent in ASL. After having taken just one sign language class at UT Knoxville at the time, when I was going through school, there was only one sign language class being offered, and I took it and changed my major on a whim. Go figure. So I was recruited to develop programming outside of the library in 1979. So I started doing some collection development, having worked with an interpreting service, providing interpreters to help deaf people go to the doctor, go to the bank, go to see an attorney, go to family events. It was just any number of different things. I knew the need out in the community for good, clear language. So I wanted to, I created, the first thing I did when I got here was create a collection development policy. I wanted to educate the public about deafness and hearing loss, and I wanted to make sure that any of the materials that the Nashville Public Library had were accessible to people who are deaf and hard of hearing. So that was a monumental goal. Those goals still are monumental in today's day and age, but thanks to laws and especially the Americans with Disabilities Act, it's really made life a whole lot easier. So I started developing a pretty nice collection here. The program started as a local program, and we've changed names at least 3 times since I've been here. It started as the Library Service for the Deaf, and then library service for the hearing impaired came in vogue, and then it's now politically correct to say library services for the deaf and hard of hearing. So we pretty much follow whatever the community likes to call themselves. So deaf and hard of hearing and deaf blind are the current terminologies used in the community today. We have both physical and digital collections. We are in the process of migrating our AV collection from a DVD format to a digital format. And it's slow going. Hopefully we'll be able to lend materials out, but that gets into, once we make them digital, into copyright issues. And so we've delved a whole lot into what those copyright restrictions are or aren't. And controlled digital lending is something that we're very seriously taking into account. Regardless, we do work with Overdrive, and we purchase a lot of materials on Overdrive for our e-collection. Some of our AV materials that are online are purchased through or come through Hoopla or Canopy, which are other digital platforms that are available for the public to use. We've got periodicals, we've got a reference collection, we've got extensive vertical files. I spent a lot of time developing finding aids for all of the materials that we have. That's pretty much, it's nice to have all this stuff, but it's really hard to put your finger on it. The ILS system that we have is only good for the materials that are cataloged, but there's a lot of materials here that are not cataloged and that need to be found, and we get reference questions on those on a daily basis. So the collection is one part of what we've developed. We've done extensive programming, everything from captioned movies back in the late 1970s, before captioning was mandated by law, and now you can just turn it on and off on your television set. But prior to that, deaf people had to get together and order special captioned films and needed a place to view them at, and the library was a perfect place to provide that. We've done signing story times, which are, we did some special programming and curriculum development to create programming for both hearing infants whose parents wanted them to learn some sign language, wanted to make communication easier between the parent and the nonverbal toddler, as well as for deaf children to be able to communicate with their parents. We've done, we've had deaf authors here. We've had entertainers here, deaf entertainers. We have had the Little Theater of the Deaf, which is an arm of the National Theater of the Deaf, come in, and we brought in school groups to be able to provide performances and programming for them. We had a huge exhibit called History Through Deaf Eyes come through, and that was a Gallaudet exhibit that was done partially curated by us, partially curated by Gallaudet University out of Washington, D.C., a university for the deaf in Washington. We had about 15,000 people about 15 years ago go through that exhibit, and had all kinds of different folks come and speak during that exhibit, including Dr. I. King Jordan, who was the first deaf president of Gallaudet University. And it happens that he is also a UTK graduate. He got both his master's and his doctorate degrees. 1971 was his master's and 73 was his doctorate, both in psychology at UTK. And he became deaf from a motorcycle accident. So he wasn't born deaf, but he became deaf due to an injury. Dr. Jack Gannon, who is a very acclaimed, I think he recently passed away, deaf author, was here. We've done teacher in service training programs, on special learning systems that are available for teachers of the deaf to use with their students. We've done ASL interpreter in-service training programs here. We've had some very cool international speakers. I don't know if any of you before your time probably saw Mr. Holland's Opus that had Richard Dreyfuss in it, that featured different deaf people. And one of those guys was here doing an in-service training program for us for interpreters. We've hosted all kinds of expos. For a while, it was the in thing to have deaf expos, large exhibits, I guess, and speakers to come in to talk about deafness. We've done a deaf expo. We've done an expo for people with vision loss. We've done an expo for deaf blind people, which is interesting. So we've hosted all different kinds of expos. As well, we've done programming that unites the community at large. So meaning that whenever there's been an issue, like in, it's been less than 10 years ago, there were 2 bills in the state legislature to create interpreter licensure within the state of Tennessee. One was geared towards, one was brought to the legislature from the deaf community. One bill was brought to the legislature from the interpreter community. Neither was great for either community. So the library served as the middle ground to bring members of both the deaf community and the interpreting community together to get on the same page so that they could create legislation that would benefit both communities. When you think about it, you think, oh, it's, this is a job that one person does, and these are the people that receive the services, but it's more than that. When an interpreter serves as the literal voice of many deaf people. So that has resulted in I guess changes into the qualifications, the basic qualifications that an interpreter needs in an educational setting. It has not yet resulted in interpreter licensure for general interpreters within the state. So just as audiologists or speech pathologists or massage therapists or whatever practice you are, medical or otherwise, practitioners are who need licensure at this point in time, outside of schools, there are no basic requirements that someone needs to have in order to interpret for a deaf person in the state. Although there is a law on the books for that mandates minimum requirements for someone to interpret in a legal setting. The hazard there is that anyone can go in and interpret for a deaf person who's been in an accident or in the hospital or for any number of different things. And there's no basic, you're not guaranteed that whoever's interpreting is being true to the interpretation. And that makes it really, really difficult for folks oftentimes. So, and oftentimes, you'll see possibly in a library setting where somebody is wanting a piece of material or whatnot, and they're coming in and asking you as a librarian for it. How do you know that it's a true interpretation, or you're getting the full meaning? Are you looking for the author? Are you looking for a title? Are you looking for subject information? Because oftentimes the deaf person isn't really clear on exactly what they're looking for. So we spend a lot of time here asking reference questions and helping to answer those questions to hone in on what people want. We spend a lot of time here having deaf people come in and bring documents, government documents possibly, or even work documents in, and putting it down in front of us and saying, what does this mean? You know, I have no idea what this letter is saying, or sometimes it's been an eviction notice. The English language barrier is a huge issue here. And so we spend a lot of time working one-on-one with a lot of folks to be able to sift through and help them understand what it is they're being asked to provide. In addition to some of the programming that we do and reference question asking, we do our own PR here and have for many years with the Library Services for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing program, building relationships within the deaf and hard of hearing community. I spent many years going to events within the deaf community and being there, being seen. And, you know, after a while, then people go, oh, she's the deaf librarian. She's our librarian. She's the one, you know, that will help us provide services, will help provide services to us. And it's a way to, for us to gain credibility within the deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind community, as well as a way to publicize our services. So it's a really great two-way street because we need them and they need us, and we're able to provide services, and we're able to help them through whatever they need. And it's very cool. Even today, we have people coming into, we've gotten some really good publicity through online social platforms and whatnot, where people are coming in from all over the country as well as internationally every once in a while and going, oh, this is my library. This is about me, you know, and they're just so proud of it. And that's just a really cool feeling to have. So that's very cool. Another thing we have are archives, and this is, archives are not something that I take for granted because they're hard won. Meaning for years and years and decades, the deaf community has held on to their piece of history, their schooling, their whatever they're involved in. So there is the Tennessee School for the Deaf, which is located in Knoxville. And they have some archives, and I've worked with them extensively. I've hired through Lyrasis some archivists and have written a grant through the National Endowment for the Humanities to bring archivists there, and through the State Library and Archives to write reports and help them organize their archives, which they really didn't pay attention to because I won't go into the reasons why, but it ran into bureaucracy and the deaf community going, all of the school holdings are theirs, and administration going, no, everything at the school belongs to the state, it's ours. So there was a real disconnect there. So as a result, much of the materials there have disappeared. They haven't put a priority on necessarily preserving things that need to be preserved. So it's kind of scary to see what happens to a bit of deaf culture, because deaf culture really has emanated from the state schools for the deaf and not from any other place. And deaf organizations grew out of the schools for the deaf. So when I talk about archives, one of the organizations, the Tennessee Association of the Deaf, which it was an outgrowth of the Tennessee School for the Deaf after the kids graduated from high school, from the School for the Deaf. Most of them did not go to college way back when. Nowadays they do, but back when they didn't. But they were really interested in staying connected, so they formed their own social groups and their own clubs. And the Tennessee Association of the Deaf is still in existence today, well over 100 years old. And it is finally, after decades and decades, they have donated their archives, their original archives to us, to the Library Services for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. And so we have them boxed up and inventoried, and they're available for folks. Yeah, yay is right. I agree. So that's a very, very cool thing. And we also have a archives from the National Fraternal Society of the Deaf. It used to be way back when that deaf people were not allowed to purchase any kind of insurance on their own. So they created their own insurance organization. And every state had their own organizations. Pretty much any of the major cities had a chapter of the National Fraternal Society of the Deaf that sold life insurance, that sold car insurance, things that we just take for granted. But it was felt insurance companies way back when did not think that deaf people were a good risk, and so they were refused insurance. So the folks were smart enough to start their own organization, and really it was just within the past like 20 years that FRAT, that's the abbreviated name of the National Fraternal Society of the Deaf, really closed. Around the country, there's a museum in Kansas City and outside of Kansas City that was wanting to collect all of the FRAT artifacts, but the Tennessee deaf community really did not want to send their collection, whatever they had collected, to Kansas, and so they donated it to the library here. So it's been kind of wonderful to see that local artifacts are being kept locally. One of the other things that we have going on with the Service for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing is a website. So I think I can share my website. Let's see. Yes, I need to pull it up first. So with you guys, yes, and here it is. So this is the Library Services for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing's website. And it has a lot of resources on it that are available. There are certainly library resources where you can search the catalog. All of our materials are cataloged within the Nashville Public Library system. So people with a Nashville Public Library card can request any book or AV material from any branch location. It'll be delivered there. They can pick it up and drop it back off there. We do have a special library card for people who live in other areas of the state. You scroll down, there's a special application that can be downloaded. And we ship materials free of charge and pay return shipping charges to anyone within the state of Tennessee. This is a way so everything's cataloged within the Nashville Public Library system and is searchable on NPL's catalog. And so there's a lot of back and forth between the two. We also, under Connect, have a place for people to post job openings. If there are jobs within that are good for a deaf person, then anyone can post a job there. Or if there are jobs that are available for teachers of the deaf or interpreters or captioners or any other support types of personnel, then any of those jobs are acceptable to post. We have a statewide event calendar. So you'll see on the side of the page here, events, that here is the event calendar for March, and you can, today is the 20th. So there's the American Society for Deaf Children has an event. You can click on it and view more, and you can find out more information about the event that would be of interest to the deaf or hard of hearing community. So there are different views for the event calendar. You can look at, if the Zoom thing gets out of my way, you can look at the event calendar. You can see in the middle of the page here by date, a listing of the events. So you can click on any of the events and get the same detailed information, or you can go to a larger event calendar here and get a traditional calendar where you can view events this way as well. So, and you can search by month, and you can search and click on any one of these, and you'll find out more information about what specifically is happening on that date, where it is, a map, all that good kind of stuff that's available. So we're in the process of revamping this under Learn. One of the neat things that we have, I'd love to tell you about, is a Deaf Journey series where we're beginning to do oral histories of different deaf adults and making those available online in an interpreted format. There's no one who's really capturing the history, any type of oral or signed history of the deaf community, and we are trying to do that. Another cool thing that we have, Nashville Public Library has a rich history of marionette shows that are available for people in person. They recorded a bunch of those shows, and we paid to have interpreters inserted into them. So you can look at any of these online that have interpreters put into the programs as well, which is very, very cool. We have a lot of helpful links. So you can search by Tennessee. And these are, I created this page specific to Tennessee because we're a Tennessee program. So these are all services available within Tennessee, although there are many more than this. But these are some of the most frequently asked questions, like where can I find an interpreter? What do I do if I have a newborn hearing child? I'm looking for an accessible telephone for somebody who's deaf. What about deaf-blind services? Then there's all kinds of organizations that are available. All of these are national organizations that serve deaf, hard of hearing, or deaf-blind people. It's getting into conference season. So here's a listing of all the different conferences that are available. You can scroll through and find different information on education, on parenting, on sign language. That has to be the most common request we get, are people looking for sign language materials, different technologies that are available. So if you're looking to find relay services, so if you get a phone call from someone and they say they're with a relay service, then there's actually a deaf person on the line, and the relay service is the voice for the deaf person, possibly, if they're using a video phone relay service, meaning a sign language relay service. Or you might be hearing through a caption relay service the deaf person's voice, and then whatever you say back to them is being relayed, they're using technology to revoice what's being said, and it'll come out on their telephone or their cell phone in a print format. This gives you information on different apps, speech to text apps. If ever you're working with someone, I suggest that you use, take out your iPhone or your Android device and use Live Transcribe, or use your note phone, or now on Apple iPhones within the past month or so, they have an accommodation called live captions that the deaf person can activate on their cell phone, and you just speak and it'll come out in captions on their phone, which is very, very cool. So there's all kinds of resources here. Anyone can log on, create an account in the upper right-hand corner. You can log in. You'll have to create your own password, And then you'll be able to post or submit for posting any job or event or any job or event or resource. And in terms of resources, we just got an IMLS grant, Institute for Museum and Library Services, to develop a national website of hearing loss resources. So we're knee deep in the middle of developing this website. So it will include all these resources that are available. This is Tennessee, for example. Tennessee's resources, including the calendar, all different kinds of landing pages. You can do a specific search. You can click on links. So we're working on developing this throughout the country. So this is really kind of exciting wherever you go. If you know of any resources, you can go back to the homepage, click on the header here. If you're in charge of a resource, you can add a resource. You can submit a possible resource without logging in, though, if you just know of some place that provides a service, which is very cool. The last thing I want to talk about very, very briefly is, here's the link to the Nashville Talking Library page. But if you scroll over services and accessibility to the Nashville Public Library, our equal access division of the library is under ADA accommodations. It's not up to date, but we provide everything from text magnifiers to a special ADA computer that has everything from special hardware, oversized monitors, computer monitors, to an accessible keyboard, a large keyboard with different colored keys that are available, a scanner reader device that'll scan any pre-printed matter and it will magnify it. You can change the color of the background, the color of the font, the size of the cursor, you name it. And it will read it back to you, which is great for people who have vision loss, as well as for people with learning disabilities. We've got Braille translation software, a Braille embosser, a refreshable Braille display. We have public video phones. We make accommodations for staff, everything from screen filters to adaptive mice for computers, adaptive software, mind mapping software we've done. And we provide public accommodations for people, including we'll provide interpreters free of charge for any NPL program. We'll provide CART, real-time captioning for programming that the library provides, audio description for movies or plays. Assistive listening devices are built into all of our public spaces. So there's all kinds of devices that are available and whatnot. So those are the programs that we have. I know I've overspent my time. What's my day like? My day is crazy. You know, I can tell you what I've done today a little bit. I've done a little bit of collection development stuff in terms of identifying books that are missing or that go with specific videos that are available, processing invoices for AV digitization. Friday, I had a meeting with our digitization contractors that we're working with to do that service. Marketing and communications, working with statistics and preparation for the city budgeting process. Zoom licensing. Did you know that your Zoom account can be made accessible with captioning? It does provide AI captioning if you enable it before you start the meeting, which is very cool. Do a lot of website development, spend a lot of time on budgets. No 2 days are the same. I do any number of different things. So just know it's really varied. And if I have any advice to any of you at all, it would be pursue your passions. You know, whatever you're passionate about, go for it. You know, in any special library or any library that you're interested in, pursue it. So for the person who was interested in cataloging and has been there 50 years. If that's her passion, then by golly, that's what you should do, and for me, it's been the disability community, and I've enjoyed every bit of it. And it's not that, yeah, I do want to retire. I'm tired, but it's something that I love doing, and it doesn't mean that I'll drop out. It just means that I'll get to pursue it in a different way than I've been doing it at the library, and that's a very cool thing. So I'm open to questions if anybody has any questions.
I had
kind
a
of
question,
have
Sandy.
one.
You first, Julia.
I was just curious when you said that you were recruited
Mhm.
and you had taken like one sign language class at UT and then changed your major. Had you had like any library experience before that?
Before that, nope.
And
had
you
not-
went like straight into like developing this services?
I had used libraries. I had signed up for one library science class when I was at UT. And honestly, my major was accounting, and I saw somebody signing on campus. And I switched majors to Def Ed. I'd lost a year and a half of credits, a few credits transferred, but no electives did. So I had to make up. I got national certification in Def Ed and whatnot. So I graduated a quarter late. They were on the quarter system way back when. And didn't know whether I'd like it or not. But I knew the deaf community. And at that time, the special projects director of the Nashville Public Library, there was such a position at that time, a woman who had worked at the Library of Congress, who was familiar with the grants, federal grants that were available at the state and local levels. At that time, it was LSCA grants, Library Services and Construction Act grants. Now they're LSTA grants, technology grants. But she came back, and she's the one that wrote the grant for the Talking Library to start, and she wrote the grant for the Library Services for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. She happened to be on the board of directors of the organization I was working for locally, and I knew the deaf community from children through adulthood. I had been working with deaf adults for 3 years. And really, the deaf community taught me how to sign. It was like, if you want to learn any foreign language, learn it from native language users. And that's where I learned how to sign. And they took a chance on me and said, okay, you know the community, what they need. Let's see if we can make it work at the library. And so it's just kind of a fluke that I've made it work, or it's a lot of hard work. Anyway, you want to look at it. But yeah, I did not have a degree. So I, kind of feel guilty talking to you about this, but I think it goes to show, if you have a passion for whatever you're doing, that you can succeed. And I've had the full support of library administrations through the years. I've been through 5 directors now, and each one has given me their full support. And that's just been very encouraging and really kind of a nice situation.
Sandy, I'm sorry if I missed it, but I wanted to ask about how many people tune in to the Talking Library when you all are broadcasting.
Really hard to know. We've got streaming numbers, but we've got 412 receivers that are distributed throughout a 20 county region throughout Middle Tennessee, because that's as far as the WPLN signal will go. We know that streaming is kind of new to us. We've only been doing it a year and a half or 2 years. And last year we only had like 2,500 hours of streaming. And it's been we've had people listen from all over the world, but it's mostly Tennessee, or people that used to live in Tennessee, because that's who would be most interested in it. 2,500 hours last calendar year is what it was. In terms of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing program, We've only collected statistics on people, the number of people who have borrowed materials. So we average approximately 200 plus reference questions a month. We have loaned materials to over 15,000 people across the state. Any other questions? Bored you to tears, huh?
No, that's not the case.
In anything in particular you're interested in or not, just know that people access information differently. You know, when it comes to the disability population. Okay. And so we try to make those accommodations really, really well. Okay, so Amy's got a question. You never know how or where you're going to end up. It's always amazing to hear people's stories, even if they didn't have librarianship as their goal. That is true. To have a sense of the most popular program amongst the community. So I don't know whether you mean the deaf community or the blind community. The most popular program for the Nashville Talking Library service is the newspaper. People want the news, and newspapers are read through the National Library Service. They have a BARD program that reads a lot of newspapers nationally. I don't believe they're read by a human voice. They probably by AI. So that most definitely is the most popular. For the deaf and hard of hearing community, it just varies. I mean, you know, attendance wise, a lot of it depended on when we had money or if we have money and how we're able to market it. And so the most popular program by far was the History Through Deaf Eyes exhibit, with so many people, over 15,000 people seeing the exhibit. We had deaf docents. We did all kinds of cool programming when I had more state money. I guess what I didn't tell you was that I've ended up having to lobby the legislature a couple of times with the support of the city and with the backing of the city. And I even had a couple of the library directors go with me because they wanted to learn the process. So it's what's not in the job description oftentimes takes precedence, but there's no two ways around it. It's politics. So you have to develop those relationships, especially if you want to move up and do anything on a more managerial level. I hate to say that. Yeah, it'd be nice to think that everybody, you know, just were promoted based on how good they did, but a lot of it is politics as well.
I've got to go host another event that starts in 2 minutes. So I just wanted to say thank you for coming to share with us. I was not bored. In fact, I found this a really engaging overview, and I definitely want to check out your website now. So thank you for sharing your long career with us so briefly, but it was great to talk with you.
Thank you very much for listening and attending, and let me know if you have any questions, okay?
Take care.
Great. Thanks so much.